Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is episode 201. That's right, we are on the other side of 200, season 4, episode 41. Hope you're doing great. Hope you had a great week. It's another week that has been like a decade. I mean, so many things going on in so many places in the world. If your world intersects with my world, Israel, the U.S., a lot going on. And it makes for a much interesting and some not so interesting conversation around town on a lot of subjects, but it certainly keeps it busy and keeps it interesting. So this week, episode 201, we're talking about the subject of character and reputation. Character and reputation. Before we dive into that, let's get our win of the week out of the way and our learning of the week, not small things, but important things. Our win of the week this week, my win of the week this week, is my brother and sister-in-law becoming grandparents this week for the first time. It is the first grandchild from this generation in our family, which is a big deal, which makes my parents great-grandparents for the first time. Also, an amazing and unbelievable thing to celebrate. It's a big deal. As the world progresses and as time goes on, as people continue to live longer, you see people who are living into the situation where they're not just grandparents anymore, but great-grandparents and even beyond. It's an amazing accomplishment. It's an amazing blessing to have in one's life, and I'm thrilled beyond belief for my brother and sister-in-law on the occasion, obviously for their daughter and son-in-law for the occasion of the birth of their son. So congratulations, Mazal Tov to them. That's how we call it, Mazal Tov to them. And many more in the future. Our learning of the week is more sobering, I think, which is the idea that effectively we should take nothing for granted. And we should not expect anything in return for all the good that we may have done in the world. Because in the end of the day, if we're no longer useful or we're no longer beneficial, people might find us superfluous and send us out to pasture and have no use or value for us whatsoever. And so if that's a veiled comment towards what took place in the last week in the United States, let's not make it veiled for just a minute here. I'll stand on my soapbox. You have a gentleman, whether you liked him or didn't like him over the course of the last 50 years, who served his state and served his country for 50 plus years in a variety of capacities, doing a whole host of things. Again, good or bad, his legislation's plus or minus, but he played that role. He led a certain way. He was loyal to his team. He was loyal to his party. And then when it became clear that he could no longer win or serve any purpose for them, they effectively chucked him out, which is very hard to see happen to anyone, let alone in that public manner. But it's an important learning as well. Obviously, you always want to be contributing. You always want to be a person in society, in your community, in your home, who's adding value. We always want to think about adding value. At the same time, we'd like to also believe that there is some respect that comes with it. There's something that comes along with that on the other side of it. Again, appreciating that the stakes are high in a presidential election. But it's sobering to appreciate how that can very quickly change, and for no other reason than you weren't winning. Yes, there's an issue of mental acuity and the ability to serve, but clearly that might not have been a factor if the person was still leading in the polls, which only makes it all the more painful, dirty, disheartening, whatever you want to call it. But I could go on and on and on that subject. But that is our learning of the week. Take nothing for granted. Do the work that you're going to do. Do good work because it's good work. Do good work that's going to have impact on people and their lives and make their lives better. But don't do it because you're expecting some sort of reward at the end of it. We know that from the Ethics of the Fathers. That should not be an expectation. Also, I want to make a quick recommendation. If you never listened to it, episode 40 of Coaching the Bible on the subject of succession, I think is a worthy listen on the subject of Moses looking for his successor and how that plays out and how that is interesting in the current moment about how succession works and how it doesn't work, how important it is, and how important it is to get right. Okay, on reputation and character. So Abraham Lincoln once said the following: character is like a tree and reputation its shadow. The shadow is what we think it is, and the tree is the real thing. This very much underscores the concepts of character and reputation, and bringing them together specifically because I think they resonate rather well when we compare two characters that appear at the end of last week's portion, but in the beginning of this week's portion, known as Pinchas. Those two characters, one by the name of Zimri and one by the name of Pinhas. Zimri is the perpetrator of evil in this story, in the sense that he does a very flagrant act of illicit and inappropriate behavior in public space, in a public domain, in the face, effectively, of Moses, with a woman who is not his wife, a woman who is not of the Jewish people. It's really egregious. On the other side of that, you have Pinchas, who takes action and kills both the man and the woman in this situation. And when we think about those two, it's sort of an appreciation of initially how we think of their names. When we hear their names, what is the connotation that attaches to their names? Or as we like to say, what's in a name? It's a subject I've discussed a number of times, not in this space specifically, but what's in a name? The name Zimri has a meaning in the sense that it connotes, it reflects, it implies certain traits. It has a certain reputation attached to it, has a certain character attached to it, as does Pinchas, or Phineas, as he might be known in English. When a person is given a name, so there's an attachment, or a set of attachments potentially that come to that name. I remember many years ago there was a rabbi colleague of mine who every time he would attend a baby naming ceremony, he would hold his breath and close his eyes and clench up a little bit because he was so concerned that they might give the child a name that was almost too big to bear. And he would breathe a sigh of relief when it wasn't the case. Even though the reality of it is, and it's super important to say this, and that's why I'm saying it now, is that ultimately the name is less crucial, but more is the reputation and the character more than anything else that the person builds that then fills in the gaps in that name. Their actions, the consistency in their ethical and virtuous behavior, the impact on their community, ultimately decide what the value and the meaning of that name actually represents, for good and for bad. And then where that name is then used into the future. So you'll see names that persist over time and names that disappear. Here's an example in the Jewish community. The name Ishmael is actually a name that was used in Talmudic times for rabbinic scholars. It's not a name that would be used today for anyone naming their child in the Jewish community, call their child Ishmael. It's just it fall out of favor. Great name, great example is Adolf. So if you look in history, just take a look at the earlier part of the 20th century, the 19th century. Adolf was a name that was used in Germany as a name to be, in Germany and Austria as a name to be used for young men, for children. It's not a name that you would use now, and if you did, you'd get a quick, like a quick stare, a quick look, how it doesn't work. To the point at which a number of years ago when they put out the names of hurricanes, and initially the name Adolf was on the list of the names of hurricanes to be, they took the name off because the idea that they would have a hurricane that came and God forbid that hurricane was actually dangerous and disastrous, that would actually be a thing. And so we have to appreciate that notion. But the reality of the name is less important than the reality of the reputation and the character that the person builds that then ultimately associates and attaches with that name. So in our book, in our story, we have these two characters. We have Zimri, who is exhibiting defiance and rebellion and a disregard for communal laws and mores in engaging in this illicit behavior. His public sin leads to this plague which affects many, 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 many people and leaves what you might call a legacy of infamy. What's interesting about him also is that he has another name. The Talmud tells us that Zimri's actual other name is Shlumiel, the son of Tzurishaddai, and he is actually the leader of the tribe of Simon. So it's all the worse because it extends beyond just the person into the person's tent, the person's home, into the family, and then here the tribe, the entire tribe, is then tarnished by this person's actions. On the flip side of that, you have Pinhas, who demonstrates a real zealotry, who has a massive level of integrity and a commitment to the communal values and communal mores and ethics, who takes a decisive action against that transgression, and in his response ends the plague and affords to him the blessing of peace for the future. So Pinchas becomes a name for forever, and Zimri becomes a name not to be used, not to be said out loud. And the reason that is because ultimately at their root is a question of character and reputation. And so it's important to define those two terms and appreciate how those two terms, both character and reputation, play a role for you as a leader. Again, like we always talk about, you as a leader in your home, you as a leader in your community, you as a leader in your business and work environment. And so let's take a minute here and understand the difference between character and reputation. Can appreciate sort of in reverse as we're talking about how it actually applies and how it fits really nicely into this conversation about these two personalities, Zimri and Pinchas. And the reason I talk about them specifically as opposed to sort of interjecting Moses, because Moses is this all-encompassing figure who plays a role in many, many stories. Here you want to zoom in onto the unique personalities of the moment and appreciate how that is actually a factor and important for them. So, okay, character. Let's define character. Character is defined as the set of moral and ethical traits that really ultimately define a person's true nature. It's intrinsic, it's consistent across all contexts, and it's really the foundation to one's actions. Reputation, on the other hand, is really the perception that others have of you based on your past actions and behaviors. It's more extrinsic as opposed to intrinsic. It's influenced by public perception, and reputations can vary. And so what I like to think and what I want to sort of share here is that character reveals reputation. An authentic character, a person who at their core, in their essence, is a moral-based person, is an ethically rooted person, will lead to having a genuinely positive reputation. So then reputation reflects character. So character reveals reputation, reputation reflects character. The public perception we would want to be rooted in and grounded in true ethical behavior. And so what I'd like to sort of think about is, as an idea, which I saw in a number of quotes, is that character is in play when you're making an ethical decision that no one sees. So Pinchas's character comes to the fore and his reputation is thereby enhanced because in his root, at his essence, intrinsically, he is dealing with that situation, and then he manifests it by his action that goes out to the public. You get it? So his reputation, therefore, is built off of the root character who he is. Zimri, on the flip side, is the exact opposite, right? His reputation in the negative is built on the fact that at his core, his character is essentially morally rotten. This ultimately plays out in the public perception, as you would see in some sort of scandals and situations that happen. So it could be that something happens that goes wrong, that's bad, That's not necessarily a reflection of your character, but your reputation can be tarnished, but you can sort of rehabilitate and fix it in this public situation in the manner in which you act. The manner in which you act is rooted in your character. So where does it come from? So character and reputation, underlying it in terms of the underlying psychology, philosophy, really important to sort of appreciate. So this initially starts effectively as a human being in our moral development, how we develop morally over the course of time and how we progress through the different levels of moral reasoning, higher stages as we get older, what we're willing to sort of incorporate, what we're starting to think about, what's of value to us. You can look at all the writings of, you can talk about Lawrence Kohlberg, and in that sense. And so the measure of who we are, this is a quote from Kohlberg, the measure of who we are is what we do with what we have. And so that develops and crosses over the course of time. So this is at the core of character, an appreciation of our personality traits, how conscientiousness and agreeableness are linked to our ethical behavior. And so our ability to sort of appreciate as we grow is the development of our character. You can find a person who might be viewed necessarily as someone whose character is underdeveloped for, let's say, their age and stage in life. What's important to appreciate also then is putting ourselves in situations or finding ourselves in situations where we have what's known as cognitive dissonance, right? The theory of cognitive dissonance is that people experience psychological discomfort when their actions conflict with their values. This discomfort then motivates them to change their behavior to restore that harmony. This comes from Leon Festinger in Cognitive Dissonance. This is how we grow, we talked about this, it's like that outside the comfort zone, things of that nature. That's all in the building and the development of one's character. With respect to the psychology of reputation, so the psychology of reputation is much more built into the idea of appreciating social identity theory. I'm gonna destroy this name. Henry Tajfel, I think is the name, Tajfel. It's outlined in his work called Social Identity and Intergroup Relations that people effectively derive part of their identity from the groups that they belong to. And it influences their actions and in many cases their good behaviors and their bad behaviors, their good reputation and their bad reputation as well, right? Who we identify with. That's the idea of show me who your five closest friends are, and I'll tell you who you are. That's very much the case. You can talk about impression management. You can talk about social comparison theory. You can talk about a lot of things that undergird the notion of reputation. But you can see it very much in the real world in the sense that there is something called reputation management. It's a fascinating business that exists in the world, reputation management. Try to Google yourself and sort of see how that plays a role in the world, right? So there are companies that exist to make sure that as you do the search for yourself, that, it only shows up in the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 14th page on Google, and no one actually gets to see it. There are many companies that are actively working. This is sort of like public relations. They're monitoring social media. It's somewhat of crisis management to maintain a certain public perception of an individual and or an organization. So they're monitoring the traffic, they're responding to the things that are going on, they're promoting stories in a certain manner. That's reputation management. It's very frontal, it's very external, as opposed to character management, which is not a business, although it's probably really worthwhile in investing in for yourself and your team and everyone around you. So it's an important sort of thing to think about. When we think about sort of the reality of character and reputation, just take any situation that could come up and appreciate its impact. So let's say you're a senior leader in your business, in your company, or you're the founder, or you're a researcher, and you uncover either unethical practices or fudged numbers within your organization. Let's assume for the moment in that situation, there's a chance that nobody will ever find out about it. It'll never become public. Or that it'll become public so many years down the line that you'll have sort of been detached from it and almost not responsible from it. So what do? Do you address it publicly? Short-term impact, long-term impact, how do you think about that? Do you cover it up? Short-term impact, long-term impact in terms of that. This is difficult. You can consider if it's a public space, the media fallout, if it's a personal space, the communal or the familial fallout and impact of this, legal consequences, certainly ethical consequences, maybe financial consequences, and you're weighing all of this as it's going on. So if you're only worried about reputation, you're simply only worried about what other people think about it. That's one way to look at it. If you're worried about character, it's almost like you don't really care what other people think about it whatsoever. You're really more focused on how you think about you and who you are in your essence. That's the character. That's the character. That's the root of who we are as people. And so we have to sort of always think about the benefits of good character and good reputation. We want people to think of us certainly positively and put us in situations where we have opportunities based on the fact that we've built a certain kind of character and a certain kind of public reputation. We want those things to be in synergy and congruence with each other because we don't want our reputation to be out of sync with our good character and our good nature. And those things ultimately accrue to us for the good. So for as a person, we're looking to the benefit, obviously, of having good reputation and certainly good character is that it's going to build a lot of trust and a lot of respect. It's going to really help towards long-term success. It's going to increase and improve the morale of the team. And of course, in business, it's going to enhance brand. Take any really good brand in the world today and think about why you purchased the Nike sneakers or the Apple products. They have built a reputation in public that allows you to simply just trust that what they're doing is good. But think about the fact that, let's say a situation comes up where the manner in which they're producing their products belies the reputation that they have. That means that fundamentally the stuff that you don't hear about, that goes to character, the root values of the business might not be in line. You'd like to think that it's not the case. So you'll take someone like Mandela as an example. They use him a lot in these sort of situations. The character, the reputation, the character is in a level of integrity and resilience, commitment to justice. The reputation publicly as a result of that is global respect and admiration for generations, no question about it. On the flip side, you can take a Madoff or Lance Armstrong. Lance Armstrong is a great example of this, right? His reputation was X, world-renowned talent, athlete, advocate, inspirational person, but the root was rot. The character at core was not. And so ultimately, it's no longer there. Ultimately, it's not exactly who anyone would want to be. And so what we have to then do is to think about how do we as a leader, as a person, go about then developing a plan forward, because the truth is you can do reputation rehabilitation for sure. You'd obviously prefer proactively from the beginning not to be in that situation. And you can also do character redevelopment. There's no question that people change and people can take what's really important is the hard look at themselves to get to where they be. There's a great quote, and here's sort of this action plan that I would look at really quickly to be able to really help you get there with respect to character and then reputation. Focus on character, let reputation take care of itself. I like to think that character is the work that you do, that's the inner work, and reputation is the outgrowth, is the result of that based on your good work. So here's a great quote from John Wooden, Coach John Wooden. Be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. So what's important first and foremost in this process is really the acceptance upon yourself of the self-reflection and that you want to get better. You want to improve your reputation. It is fixable. It is fixable. It'll take a long time if, God forbid, you have a situation where your reputation is destroyed because of something that you did. But it is fixable. But work foremost on character. So first is the self-reflection period for personal growth. If you're a leader, take the time out of the day and the week, build it into the calendar it, where you're focusing on your self-reflection and your personal growth. That's number one. Number two would be some form of communication. If that's on the team, it's a really open conversation. We talk about this a lot. It's at a very high level accountability that you want to put into place to really get to how you're really getting to that sort of comfort or discomfort around the subject and how you think about that. Having those sort of very public town hall meetings when you might have some sort of radical candor around it, getting people to ask those uncomfortable questions and having you as a leader answer those questions can be incredibly powerful, incredibly revealing, and I think very much in that space of that cognitive dissonance when it hits, where you can then ultimately improve. And then you want to continue to operate in a manner where you are consistently acting in a positive and growth positive manner. So here's another great quote from someone by the name of Michael Josephson. I did not have a moment to look him up, but here's a great quote. People of character do the right thing even if no one else does. Not because they think it will change the world, but because they refuse to be changed by the world. This is how you grow. So having this system in place for yourself and for the team, which allows you to grow and to continue in a manner of positive, consistent, good behavior, ultimately gets you to success. And here's the last one, I think, is really that culture that we've talked about a lot, is creating a culture of, we talked last week about psychological safety. We talked about that all the way back in the beginning, I think in episode 1. But getting to a space where you're providing this culture for everyone in your home, where if they make a mistake, they have a chance to fix it. If their reputation is dinged, they have a chance to fix it. If their character is brought into question, there's an opportunity for them to build a program where they can become better. If certain people see it on other people, they can help them along. And here's a great quote for that from Helen Keller. Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved. This requires your own inner work, but also requires the ability to have other people who are going to hold you accountable. And when they do, you're ultimately so much the better for it. And then you can, as I said, work on the inner part, the inside work, the part that nobody sees, which is the character building. And then that reflects itself really ultimately in the reputation that's perceived outside. If you want to sort of think about it in a very simple framework, it's the 3R framework that I'm making up right now. Reflect, respond, recognize. So reflect, it's the weekly journaling, the opportunity to reflect, take the moment for yourself. Respond, having the open forums, having the opportunity to talk this stuff through, and then recognize through your own regular decision-making and monthly work, day, week, month, year work, as to how you're doing, how you're going. To end it out with a quote, as always, I know I went long, I appreciate that you got here with me to the end. Here's a great quote. It's listed as a German proverb. I'm not sure if that's what the source of it is, but I think it's still a great quote. When wealth is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. When character is lost, all is lost. That is Coaching the Bible for this week. I do look forward, as always, to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful weekend and a great week ahead.